Welcome, everybody. So, I'm Leanne Shinton, and this is my podcast. I'm from Pet Biz Experts, and we do software for dog trainers, pet sitters, groomers, pet professionals. We even have a psychologist, too. So, we do a lot of cool things with tech. And just wanted to quickly share my business. I'm changing the name. I'm rebranding because we've grown. We've been with the Pet Biz Experts brand for a while, and I want to update it. New logo, new name, and just really excited about our new name is Automation Dogs. And I love it. I love the logo and everything. So you can visit us at automationdogs.com. And today we are interviewing Corinne Wisowaty from Pet Pro Innovations. Welcome, Corinne.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. And so I am going through a rebrand, and you have evolved so much too. I went from dog trainer to, tech guru, and you have gone from pet sitter. And maybe you could share a little bit about your journey and what you're doing now with Pet Pro Innovations.
Absolutely. So for a little over a decade, I owned a dog walking and pet sitting business called Wild Things Pet Services. It was one of the biggest businesses in the Chicagoland area, and I absolutely loved it. And it was quite a journey. I started off solo, and we ended up being a 7-figure business with over 62 employees.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I learned all of what I know along the way. And I found that to be a struggle a lot, often. You're kind of always inventing the wheel yourself, and there weren't really a lot of resources to help along the way. So when COVID hit and affected every pet business in the area, I decided to kind of take a break from the actual dog walking and pet sitting and really focus on helping other pet business owners who might be struggling with either growing from a one-person operation or just feeling overwhelmed in their business and feeling like they have no time for themselves or their family. They don't have the bandwidth to actually think about growth and how to get there in a sustainable way. So I started Pet Pro Innovations to not only provide consulting, but to actually provide the tools to make those changes and to make them without taking more on their plate and actually giving them more free time in the process. So that's what I'm really excited to bring to other pet business owners.
Yeah, and that's how I met you, because we have a mutual client where we're building software for him, and he has many locations, probably in big part to your coaching that you'd provided. And it sounded like, you provided a lot of that HR stuff, stuff that us, dog trainers, business owners, sometimes we just don't have time for. Like you said, we just kind of, like you did, you just kind of winged it, which is, great that we have you now as a resource. But yeah, that's how I heard all about you, was that you really are hyper focused on the HR side of things. And I think that that is definitely very unique, but very needed. Hiring is a very tough thing. So where can we start to kind of learn, like, when it's time to hire? Is that maybe a good first question?
I think so. And I think that largely it's a feeling, right? So a lot of pet business owners will get to a point in their business where they're so overwhelmed with their everyday work life that they're just suffering burnout in the worst way. They don't have time for their family or their friends. I remember in my own business, it got to the point where if I had a free day, I just slept for the entire day because I was so exhausted, both physically and mentally I could not go on. Um, and I needed that as a reset just to kind of survive the next round. Um, and it wasn't until I had met a dog trainer that I had so much respect for, and he was trying to build his business, and we kind of teamed up. I could tell that he cared as much about his business as I did about mine. And that was so it was really an easy transition to trusting him to take on some of the work that I was doing. But most people don't have that. So instead, they're kind of in this cycle of being in complete and utter burnout,
Mm.
and not knowing where to go from there. They want to hire, but they're worried that they have to give that person work and enough work to be happy. Otherwise, they're going to leave, and they're going to be in an even worse situation than they were in to start with. Um, so they're not comfortable investing in marketing. They're not comfortable in bringing on new clients. And then it's kind of the self-serving prophecy where um, they're not growing and therefore they can't sustain an employee to help them get out of this situation. So I'm helping people get the tools to kind of take some of their current burden off their plates so that they can see the finish line, which is bringing on more help and getting them um, the incoming business that is needed to sustain that growth, and to really take their business to the next level.
Yes, I love how you've, blended both of those two aspects. You bring on somebody else and you grow
Right.
because you've got now this family to feed.
Mhm.
So that is a very important, thing to think about. You're already busy. You need that other person to help you, but also let's grow. Let's get excited about this next level.
Yeah.
But I also appreciate what you're saying too about having to sleep for a whole day to recover because you're
Yeah.
physically and mentally drained. Being an entrepreneur, being a dog trainer, pet sitter, being an entrepreneur, it takes grit.
Yes, it
So
definitely does.
you
I had no idea when I started my business. I was like, "Oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to have my own schedule. I'm going to make my own schedule. I'm going to make time for my own dogs. And have all of this great time." And it did not turn out that way. And I think a lot of people go in thinking the same thing, and they get wrapped up, and they don't know how to take a step back and evaluate, you know, what they're going through and how to make it better. Um, and I think that's one of the things that I love about what you're doing is that you're really incorporating automation. And I think not enough people know anything about that, and certainly aren't incorporating that into their business enough. Um, there really is no way for one person to run a business like this without some sort of automation. Um, Otherwise, you're just spending, $30,000, $40,000 a year on an admin who is essentially doing the same thing and may not even be doing it as well. Um,
definitely, yeah, yeah,
so, like just having a system that does its job, you don't have to think about it. You set it up once and it kind of takes it from there. Is really important and really helpful.
yeah. With our business, our dog training business in San Diego, I was building out the software years ago, and our receptionist said, I'm moving back to Canada. She'd had a child, and that was her journey. And I loved her, and she'd been a client. She was like the perfect person for covering our admin. She was a stay at home mom. She was able to handle all of that at home, which was great. And I'm like, oh my gosh, to find somebody new to train them and then that not work out. And then to train somebody else and that not work,
Yep. I
all
think I
those
went through
fears.
five. I think I went through five people before I
Yeah.
found somebody who was able to do at least half of what I was hoping they would be capable of.
Yes.
Because it's a unique industry and not everybody is capable of just stepping in and doing what you need from them.
We don't all share the same brain. Yes.
True.
So, yeah. And I was lucky enough at the time I had the software. So to this day, there's not a person sitting at a desk answering phones. And, the software is doing 70% of that. It's taken so much off of the plate of the CEO now because we've sold the business. And that's something I think too, as we're talking about hiring people, when you're working in your business and not on your business, you really don't have something that one day you can sell. Like I've done numerous times. I've had businesses in Toronto, in San Diego, in Las Vegas, and I've sold and I've moved. I love to move. I live in my RV and we move around a lot. And so I'm able to have this life. And, you might move because of marriage. You might move because of, a parent's sick or something, and being able to sell your business, have something that you can sell. So I think this is going to be a really good conversation because you need to say to yourself, if I go away to Europe to compete with my dog for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, can I just walk away from my business and have it run itself? And if you can't do that,
And
you don't
most
have a
people
business that
cannot.
you can
They are
sell.
not set up for that at all. Yeah.
Exactly. So some of the fears of hiring is, can I afford to continue to pay this person? Like, what happens if I have a slow week and so on?
Mm-hmm.
I want to just say, because if I'm cleaning a poopy kennel, and I can't answer that phone, that could be a $5,000 sale right there. And it could be a long-term client that does boarding with me too. So that could be a $10,000 sale that I just, because I'm cleaning the poopy kennel, and I could have been paying somebody to, it sucks. We've all been there. We all clean the poopy kennel. That's where we start. So I'm, as an example, but that's how we learn, and I'm cleaning kennels over here. I missed that one phone call that could have been a $10,000 client right there. So I think looking at it from that perspective, giving you more time to maybe focus, like you said, on growth, on taking care of your leads, your marketing, so that you can make more money to support that person.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one of the problems that um, pet business owners who are really just getting into the idea of hiring, that they get stuck in this trap of thinking that they have to hire somebody full time, that
Mm-hmm.
they have to make this huge commitment to somebody, when in fact, that is not the case. A lot of people will start by hiring independent contractors, which is really, honestly, there are certainly some issues with that as far as liability goes and whether or not you can train them. Um, so it's a conversation, that's an entirely separate conversation. Um, but they're great for people starting out because you can just give them, 2 or 3 visits as needed, if you have overflow. And those people can start building entire routes. Or, in a dog training business, they can start building your clientele without you feeling the pressure of having to keep them happy. So I know I started off with employees, and I definitely felt that pressure, that I really had to up my marketing game in order to make sure that they had what they needed to financially survive, right? Um, so, starting off with independent contractors, or at the very least, posting a job ad that says, on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 11 and 2, this is, we need your help. So picking like the busiest times that you have and just getting help for those. Um,
I have
that
a
helps
real
too.
world.
Start small.
Yeah, I have a real world story of kind of similar to what you're describing. Just start small, don't bite off more than you're ready to chew.
Mm-hmm.
I went on Rover
Mm-hmm.
and I reached out to a whole bunch of Rover pet sitters. And I said, hey, I'm not a morning person. I need somebody to come in between the hours of like 6:30 a.m. to, 8 a.m. and just help me to get the dogs pottied and cleaned and fed. And every morning, 7 days a week, I was able to get a pet sitter to come in. So I think that's kind of what you were saying, like an independent contractor, sort of. They're already a professional. They're on Rover. And I luckily found the most amazing person. And I could see that she was meant for more. And yeah. And I'm like, I'm not ready to hire you full time, but I could totally see this happening. And she just worked her butt off and just sold herself to us. And we were like, she now owns my dog training business and she bought it from
Oh,
us.
that's
So,
wonderful. That's
yes,
wonderful.
but it
And
all started because,
it's a great way of trying somebody out before you make that huge commitment too.
yes, yes. Now, what would be some of the questions that maybe we could ask someone if we are saying, okay, we have these hours between this and that? Maybe some qualifying questions, because I feel like sometimes we're just so desperate for help, we're just so
Yeah.
exhausted, and we come across to the potential employee with desperation. And you never want to do that, even if you are feeling very desperate. I think that it's good to have some maybe qualifying questions and a process to
Hmm.
hire them. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and ideas there, because even just taking one or two of your like ideas could really save someone in the long run. Because I say it's better to be tough now in the hiring process than
Oh,
have to be tough
absolutely.
later
The
because you've
wrong
got the wrong
person can
person.
tank your reputation so quickly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you mentioned having a process that is absolutely critical. Um, I think most people are posting on Indeed and similar job listing sites, and they give you the option of having those qualifying questions on your listing, and requiring those to be answered by the applicant. And I think, you know, making sure they actually have answered all of those questions. It shows that they
Yes.
are responsible and they care whether or not you call them back, and care about the job. That's the first part. Um, and then reading through the answers and being honest. So if you said, I need somebody Monday through Friday, 11 to 2, and the person was like, well, I'm a college student right now. That kind of works for me, but in 3 months it might not. Or, I'm available all of those days except 2 or 3 of them, not just, you have to be like, okay, that actually isn't what I need. And if I hire this person now, it's going to cause issues down the road. And they're going to take the resources, the clients really, that somebody who is what I need would have, if I hadn't hired this person. Um,
I just wanted to touch on the questions.
oh, sure.
Not specifically what the questions are, but what I'm thinking
Hmm.
is you made a very good point. Indeed, you ask maybe two questions. Are you available these hours? And maybe give me an example of, you know, uh, a situation with a client that you've had in the past, if this is not your first pet sitting or dog training job, where you've resolved an issue or something. Just a couple of questions.
Hmm.
Now, in Indeed, you're going to get a whole bunch of responses. The people who didn't answer the questions, what does that kind of tell you about that person? It tells me they don't follow direction. So
Oh,
if we can
absolutely.
figure out right now that they didn't answer the questions, they don't follow directions, what do you think is
Right.
going to happen 3 months from now when they're your employee?
Right.
You're going to have trouble with them following directions. So if they didn't answer those 2 questions, 3 questions, keep it simple. Don't even look at them.
Yep.
They didn't pass that first part of the test.
And I think too that, I would always put in the job description that I needed somebody to have a car, right? We live in the suburbs, so you cannot bike from place to place. There is no public transportation. Um, and many times people didn't even read the job description And in the, I would ask as a qualifying question, do you have a car? And they would say no. And I mean, that means that they have no attention to detail and they don't actually care what you need. This is more
Yes,
about
they don't
them
care.
than the business, you know. Um, and to an extent, yes, you should absolutely care as an employee, you should care about yourself and your needs, but then you're applying to the wrong position, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I agree. Not answering or not answering the question at all is a big red flag. Um,
Hmm.
Not reading the job description is a big red flag. Um, I I think writing a lot of people get stuck writing about 3 or 4 word sentences just to get through it.
Hmm.
Um, and my experience was that the people who write 3 or 4 word sentences are just trying to fill some quota. So, like for government assistance, you have to be able to show that you've applied to X number of jobs and, um, you would reach out to the person
Mm.
who responded very shortly to the questions and you would never hear from them again, which is a waste of your time. I suppose it's good that you didn't go to the next step and actually hire that person, but still, when time is a resource, is your main resource, that's a big waste. You're wasting hours of, you know, your
On
week
the wrong
on,
person.
yeah, the wrong people.
Now, you mentioned Indeed. Where would be some other places to put the word out that you've got this offer, this job?
Well, I definitely think that is depends on your industry. We would let the local vets know. A lot of
Mm.
their vet techs would work for us on weekends or evenings whenever they had
Oh,
days off. Surprisingly, what worked really well for me was hiring school bus drivers. So we had a
oh,
bulletin um, at the bus depot, and they actually had perfect hours because um, most of our clients had school age kids. So they would need us to come when the kids were in school, which is when when the bus drivers were actually available. So, it helps
smart.
sometimes to think about like who is your target market, right? Like somebody who's available during specific hours. Um, is that a bus driver? Is that a college student? If all you have are evening and weekend hours, a college student might be perfect for you. If you just need like a few hours here and there on different days and you want to have 5 different independent contractors doing that job as needed, college students are, a great way to start that. Um, but I would say generally most people these days, if they're looking for a job, they're looking on a job site. Um,
Okay.
I would say that has always been the most effective for us.
I think too, sometimes I'll post on Facebook, my personal page, my
Mhm.
business page, and maybe reaching out to and putting the word out to certain clients because I saw they have a daughter that's in college and, just kind of keeping even though maybe you're not ready to hire at this time, still just putting the word out to clients. Oh, your daughter's like, she used to work with horses. She seems really great with the dogs. Hey, have her reach out if ever she's ready to, and then you're just putting the word out to the people that already love you and
Right.
can,
Yeah.
appreciate working for your business. So, what would be like the first entry step into an interview? Like, do you start with like a Zoom, a phone, in person? What does that look like?
I will always start with a phone call.
Okay.
Um, and, there's some debate about whether or not you should send reminder emails or reminder text messages. Deliberately, we did not, because if
Yes.
they didn't show up for the phone call, they're not going to show up to the visit or
Good one.
the training session. And from there, typically we would have enough of a conversation to know whether or not we wanted to move on to an in-person interview. Um, during COVID, we would do Zoom, um, but um, but similar to the phone call, we would see if somebody actually showed up, if they showed up on time, if they showed up, presenting themselves well, um, if they actually looked interested, or if they were just, you know, um, this was just kind of something to do for now while they were hopefully getting into maybe their career choice, right?
Hmm.
But I think that body language and actually having them get up out of their house, leaving the house and doing the job, right? Which is show up for the interview, is all a big part of that. Um, is a really
Definitely.
important part of the interview process.
Yeah, I never thought to start with the phone and not send the reminders. I love that idea. I've started with Zoom, especially with COVID. It's very natural for us to start using Zoom. And like, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Let's just get on a Zoom to start. And I'm
Sure.
definitely looking for if they are on time.
Yeah.
So I love that with the phone call too, as an extra kind of step in the
Hmm.
process. But the Zoom, you can just kind of weed out people. And then if they pass the Zoom, then maybe a Zoom with your business partner, or maybe the next step would be to come in and have a meeting, and definitely on time. Um,
Yeah.
Presentation. I've had them show up and they bring their dogs, and their dogs are barking in the car and things like that. And I'm like, I get that you love dogs, but this is also a business. So it's,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. How about checking referrals, like references?
It's been stunning to me to find how many businesses don't do that.
Hmm.
And it's incredibly important. Um, I think a lot of people get stuck in the fact that not many people actually have experience in the pet industry. Um, we as dog walkers and pet sitters weren't necessarily looking for somebody who had a formal education in dog training, or who had dog training experience. I think in your industry, that's much more important than in ours. Oh, sure.
My
No, go ahead.
I was always kind of shy about asking other businesses like about this person that had applied for my
Mhm.
job, because that other business was my competitor. And I'm like, we're supposed to hate each other, like, we're competitors. And it was just so kind of awkward. So I've been there where I did not reach out and ask. And I just wanted to share one story of, I do think this day and age, I think it's maybe social media, dog sports, like, we're actually kind of networking better with our competitors. So it's
Mhm.
easy to reach out now, and we feel like, hey, I kind of want to help you a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so I had a competitor business, dog training business, reach out to me, and she just called me and she's like, hey, I got this resume in front of me and she's worked for you and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what's the name? And she's like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. She's like, that's all I needed to say. I'm like, don't you want to hear all the stories about how bad it was? And she's like, nope, we're done. That was it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but I'm going to tell you anyway. But I was like, that is awesome that she reached out to me. And I probably just saved some dogs and some clients from having to deal with that particular person who we already
Oh,
knew should not be
absolutely.
in this industry.
Absolutely.
So definitely check references.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked for a company who had a similar situation with somebody they hired to be a manager for them. And had we had let her go, and she had actually moved on to another dog walking and pet sitting company who also hired her to be a manager because they told, she left us as a reference, and they never called us. And it wasn't until it imploded that they called to say, did this person even work for you? And we were like, oh my gosh, yes. And you never should have hired her. And I wish you had called sooner.
Yes.
Um, because it was awful. It was awful.
Yep.
And I guess another thing that I want to add just for dog walking and pet sitting companies, um, I mentioned that you probably have criteria that include some sort of education or past experience. Um, we didn't necessarily have that luxury. A lot of people have never been dog walkers or pet sitters, and um, usually owning a dog or cat yourself does not,
Mm,
help you determine whether or not they're any good at that, right? There are a bunch of pretty lousy pet owners as well. So using that experience as an indicator that they would succeed did not necessarily work for us. Um, so it was really important even to call other types of industries. Like, did they work at the Gap? Great,
hmm
call the Gap. Did they show up on time? Were they respectful to customers? Do they communicate well and professionally? I mean, those are all questions that you can ask somebody that has worked in any industry. Um, their
Definitely.
employers should be able to answer those questions at the very least for you. Um, and largely, at least in my industry, if they did well in a past job, there's a pretty high likelihood that we could train them to be excellent at this one as well. Um, so it's important to call even if they don't have experience in this specific industry.
Definitely, definitely. And I've had a lot of trainers that were completely green, and I found that that was actually kind of nice because I could help mold and shape them. I could send them to school if
Hmm.
they maybe they worked for me for 3 to 6 months. Everything was going amazing. Now I'm like, I'm going to invest in you, or maybe we could meet in the middle and you want to be a trainer. You've got I'll pay the rest, something to send them off to school too. But I do like the green trainers because there's not as much ego there too,
Yes.
or
Yeah. That's
stuck
important.
in certain like this has to be this way because that's the way I've learned it by
Yeah.
my mentor. So I don't have to get through any of that. So I'm okay with the green trainers too.
That's great. I love that you invest in your employees too. I've always found that um, really it really improves the company culture, right? So if you walk into a business and you find that, um, for example, I helped somebody through dog training school, and I supported somebody as they tried, as they went to school to become a dog groomer. We actually opened up a grooming salon for this person specifically. As she was learning, we brought on some seasoned ones to help her as well. Um, but you know, when people start with your business and they see that, they start thinking about like, oh man, this isn't just a for now job. This could be a future for me as well. There's room to grow within this company. And I think that's missing from a lot of pet businesses. That a lot of people walk in, they're like, I'm going to do this for the next 6 months, maybe. And it's not necessarily a long term position for them. Um, but making it clear that there is room for growth
Get
can
them
change that
excited.
dramatically. Yeah, and get
Yeah,
them
yeah,
excited for your business. Yeah.
yeah. I think one of the questions I have too, or just a good conversation we could have is when you first say, yes, this is the right person, I am now hiring them. I think the first, say, 35 days and more, but
Hmm.
you got to be there. You
Yeah.
kind of want to be all over them, micromanage, train. Don't just, oh, this is great. I have an employee. I'm going to go to sleep now, take a nap.
Yeah.
Those first
Quality nap.
35 days, yeah, they're critical. Um, Maybe talk a little bit about what that picture looks like to you, like how invested you are at that phase of first hiring them.
Sure. Yeah. So there was definitely a period of several years where I already had employees, and um, we had grown to such an extent that I could not keep up. I felt like I was drowning every second of the day. And we constantly felt like we were understaffed, like really, really painfully understaffed. And so we would hire somebody, they would go through like a day of training, just like rushed, honestly, trash training. And we would just hope for the best.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we got really lucky. A lot of times we didn't. Um, and I think that it wasn't the people who did not succeed that way. It wasn't necessarily that they they didn't get it. They didn't understand what the job was or what they were supposed to do, but they didn't take my business seriously because it seemed like I didn't take my business seriously.
Ah,
You know, I was just like, cool, here you are, off with you, do whatever you please. As long as you show up to this client, I'm happy. And it wasn't until we started a really intensive training program that started to change. And my fear was that it was going to take up more time than I had.
hmm
But we started incorporating really thorough online training. I started training some of our lead walkers to take over some of like the in-person field training. Um, and we made a point of checking in pretty much daily for the first 2-3 weeks, and certainly weekly for the first 3 months, just to make sure everything was going well, that they didn't have any um, questions or problems. And we would follow up with the clients as well to say,
That's good.
is there something that this person could be doing better, that we can improve, um, give them more training on. And, I think the customers, as much as the employees, appreciated that because it really showed that we cared, that we wanted these people to succeed and do a good job for the customer as well. And that was really pivotal. I think our business started growing exponentially when we started doing that, both because we had a better onboarding process and the clients were thrilled. Um, we started getting a lot more referrals from our clients.
Wow. Impressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have like an employee handbook, like, cleaning procedures and, all of the procedures kind of written down? You mentioned an onboarding course. Like, what did you
Yeah.
have going on there?
So we tried to follow on the basic principles that everybody learns. Everybody learns differently, right? There are some
Mm,
people who learn better reading, having the book in front of them. So we had a really thorough handbook that we gave to everyone.
I like that.
And then the online courses covered most of the same things, but also covered things that we couldn't really train well through print. So, like dog body language and how to handle some difficult personalities or behaviors. Walking them through what a visit looked like, right? And, all the steps they needed to take in a visit. That's very difficult to do in a manual. So we did that through video. We also had hands-on training. So, I would meet with them for several hours on the first day and teach them how to use different types of leashes and harnesses and how to hold a leash appropriately, and walk them through how to use the scheduling system and do some practice work with that. Um, and then they would meet with one of our field trainers who would take them with them for 3 or 4 days, meet some of the dogs. At first the employee would just watch the process. And then for 2 days, the employee would do it and the field trainer would watch them do it. And, after every day, they would have a little powwow about what went really well, what could use some work, if there was anything that the employee themselves did not feel super comfortable with yet, how do we address that? Um, so we really brought all training methods into the training system, and it worked beautifully.
That this is such fantastic advice. It's making me think. I just did a podcast with Dr. Erica Bowling. She's an educator by trade. She also works in the dog industry, canine fitness and such. And she was telling me that, she learned statistically that, working with people one-on-one in person and helping them and showing them and educating them, great. Also doing Zooms, doing virtual courses that they can watch, also great. But she said a hybrid of them both actually works better. And that being said, I mean, you just mentioned like having a manual. This day and age, use ChatGPT, guys. Like you guys can go on and you could take everything
totally.
that's in your brain and put it into ChatGPT
Mhm.
and print your manual. And that adds so much. Not even thinking about like training this staff member and holding them accountable to what's in this manual, this Bible. But you want to sell your business one day, you're going to need that manual,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
folder for them. But having a test at the end, ChatGPT can help you. Okay, this is, chapter 1. This is the test. If they didn't read it, they're not going to be able to do the test. Make the test a little bit hard. They have to have just read it to do the test.
Mhm.
Putting together an online course, just put the camera on yourself and,
Yeah.
get them to watch these videos. We have our platform. We can host your courses. So you can just upload them and you can have them private just for your new staff as they come on. And we can have tests that they have to fill out after watching this part of it. So they could put the whole thing in there, have them test, and then that they've watched it too, because our platform will
That's
show
key.
that.
Yeah. You
Yeah, you can
have to be
tell.
able to tell whether or not they've watched it. And I think that's really the problem that we were having previously, was that we had this Bible and we handed it off to them and we're like, great, go read this. And we had no idea. Like, did they even look at it? Did they open it ever? You hoped that they did, that they would take it seriously enough to do that. But I'm going to guess that like 80% did not. Or they just kind of cruised through it and, maybe picked out the pieces that were interesting to them.
And
Um, but
everybody learns in
don't know.
different
I don't know if
ways.
they've done it. Yeah.
Maybe like I used to run a school for dog trainers, and the fellow that was in charge of the students, he took our like huge manual, and he had an audiobook dude like read it, and that way you could just listen to it while you're driving in your car, and you got your headphones
That's a
on.
great idea.
If I don't know how to do that in an easy way, but I could see that being of good value and helping people learn, because sometimes they learn better by listening versus reading, and sometimes the other way around.
Yeah. There are some fantastic AI voices now.
There you go.
So I know for some of my training, I used, there's a company called, I think it's called 11 Labs, and they have very realistic AI voices. So you write the script, it reads it. You might have to do a couple of takes just to get the little,
Nuances.
inflections in the voice correct, but they're really good. So I definitely recommend, if somebody wants to lean heavily on a manual, that they at least get the audio. They do something like that for the audio as well.
Yeah.
Because many people are not visual learners, they're audio learners. So at least having those two different types, those two options would be helpful.
Yeah. Or even the business owner too, just sitting down in front of a recorded Zoom by themselves and
Sure.
just talking,
Mhm.
videoing some of your lessons, videoing some of your, your interactions with the clients, the meet and greets or the evaluations, and having that be something that they watch just so they kind of know the big picture and have a bit of an
Yeah.
idea from a video. And, you're less time for you to invest and you can move them along in the process. Or maybe it weeds them out and they're like, this isn't for me, dude. This is too much.
Oh, it has absolutely done that. Yeah. Um, before we did a whole, makeover of our training system. Pretty much everybody went through training, and then maybe a month or two later, we would lose a third of them.
Yep.
And it's once we incorporated the really thought out training system, a lot of like the third that would leave within the first week, which sounds terrible, but in actuality, they have not met any of the clients. We have not counted on them for any kind of, appointments or schedule, visits, and in your case, training clients. So you're not out anything that early in, right? You might be
Yeah.
disappointed that you don't have that person, but they haven't had the opportunity to mess you up,
Yep.
to either wreck your reputation or even just make life more difficult for you.
Exactly. Now, do you do like reviews, quarterly reviews, daily reviews? Like, what does that look like? Do you have team meetings?
Um, so I always recommend doing quarterly reviews, um, especially the first year. I think generally people are on their best behavior for the first 6 months, and then you start to see things slide. Um, if you have somebody who's worked with you for, we had some who were with me for 6, 7 years. We would get together twice a year and, have a chat, but it wasn't quite as formal. Um, and I think generally, which employees that would work for, and, which they need a little bit more hand holding. Um, but yes, definitely quarterly reviews for at least the first year or two for everyone. Um, we, uh, we would also check in regularly with the clients, you know, quarterly or every 6 months. Um, Usually within the first month of them switching, we really felt strongly about keeping walkers consistent. So somebody would work with a client basically until they left us, until the walker left us or the client did. So if for some reason a client had to switch walkers, we would be following up every couple of weeks for the first month or two just to make sure nothing was slipping, everything was still going well. Um, our scheduling system also had reporting software so we could see, were they showing up to the house, were they showing up on time, were they spending the right amount of time there, and we looked at those daily.
Okay.
um, so yeah, we thought that was really important.
So that gives you all your data. So when you
Mhm.
sit down for that review,
Mhm.
you have this,
Bring the
and this
data.
information.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Do you
when
have
we
like a
got
sheet that you
feedback,
fill out or something
sure.
like,
So when we got feedback from clients, we really leaned heavily on surveys or emails, like
okay.
email follow ups. That way, we would have written record. Um,
Mm,
if a client even just wrote us an email and said, "This person is fantastic. We just love them," we would save that, and we would save that in their file so that during review we had evidence of everything that we were saying, whether it was positive or negative. So if we were like, "Man, you are a rock star. We are so happy you're with us," it wasn't because we have a gut feeling that they're a good person. It's because they've, had really consistent reporting records, and the clients have consistently loved them. And, this is their attendance record. And, so we had something to back it up. And I think
mm,
too many business owners are just going into reviews saying, "Well, we think things are going well." And, 4 out of 5, we're really glad you're here. But that they're not giving any solid data.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not
I
good
know
feedback for the
no, it's
person who's
not
trying to
useful.
learn and be better too. Like, tell
Right.
me where I can be better, and you don't have
Right.
any
Yeah.
data. What would
Um, and I think again, it goes to, it doesn't look like you're taking your business seriously. If you can't, if you can't define what it means to be an A+ employee versus a B employee, that's not, um, that's not useful to them. And it looks like you don't know your business at all. Uh,
what would
so it's
be
important to have those, that even like the grading structures, like really pinpointed. So, um, what is their attendance like? If they miss this many days, how does that affect their overall performance grade? Um, and then ultimately, what do those grades mean? So, like, if they're fantastic, does that mean that th're getting a raise? What does that raise look like?
mm,
What is that based off of? If they're like really good, fantastic is or versus fantastic, what is that raise difference? Or what happens if they're not a good employee? Do you just say you're not doing well and then move on with your life? Or does that mean like now they need to go through, extra training, or, you're going to start pulling back on the number of visits that you're giving them because maybe they're just overwhelmed. Maybe they're not doing well because you're putting too much on them. And like trying to diagnose the issues and fixing them. But you can't do that unless you actually have the data.
so what would I'm so curious to find out about compiling data and like how I could easily, do I have a calendar? But before that, I really want to know, like, what do those emails look like? Are you texting the clients? Are you emailing the clients? Like, what are the questions you're asking the clients to pull the information about the staff member?
Sure. So we actually, like I said, we leaned heavily on surveys. And that is because we wanted to ask very direct questions. So if you just say, like, hey, how's it going? They don't know what you're looking for, right? They could think everything's going just fine. Maybe they actually do have some constructive feedback, but you didn't ask them for it. Um, so, we would say things like, um, are they following the instructions that you detailed, right? Are they showing up on time? Are they staying the full amount of time? Um, we did have back end data for that, but I think that actually asking the client that also shows that we care about their opinion on it too. Um, So, occasionally we would have like a 2-hour window that a person could schedule a visit in, right? So they could schedule one between 11 and 1 or 1 and 3. Um, and the client could write a little note on the visit saying, we're going to be late today. Would you mind coming towards the later end of the visit? Um, and if the walker wasn't doing that, we couldn't tell that they weren't doing that because they showed up at the right time, right? In the
Right.
right window, but they might not actually be following the instructions that the client gave them. And there's some leeway on that. If we book them in areas where they couldn't get there at that time, that's on us, right? That's on the
Yeah.
owner of the business, not on the employee. But so asking very detailed questions is so important. Did they take their shoes off? Did they leave the house as clean as it was when they got there or cleaner? Um, are they locking doors? Are they
Mm.
leaving windows open? Like, are they picking up the poop in the yard? Like all of these things, that that are requesting very specific details that they might not think to even mention if you just ask like a very open-ended question. Um,
Yeah, I'm thinking too, like those are very specific, yes or no, but there
mhm.
might be some questions, especially from a dog training perspective. If I have a staff member training my client, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being totally satisfied, or completely, clear on it, how would you feel their presentation was with you and teaching you?
Sure.
How would you feel on a scale from 1 to 10, teaching your dog? And maybe using that scale, because the yes or no's might not fit in some of those scenarios, but the scale of
Oh,
1 to 10 may give
mhm.
us a bit more data. And as you have more clients answer it, you can learn more about refining your questions too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have a number of scale questions too. And I think it's important when you have the scale questions to leave space for them to elaborate. So,
Mhm.
why did you rate them this way? You know,
Yes.
is a very easy question to ask. And if they feel like answering it, great. And if they don't, at least you have the
Yeah.
scale. But giving them opportunities to do that is important.
And
Um, but
I,
otherwise, yeah, I mean, sometimes we would just like after a meet and greet, if I wasn't there or the manager wasn't there with them, we would send an email just saying, you know, how did everything go? Did your dog, enjoy their time with this person? Do you feel safe having them in your house? Do you think this is going to go well? Do you have any questions or concerns? So at least like steer them in the direction of this is the feedback that I'm looking for. It doesn't necessarily need to be as formal as a survey.
Yeah, I think too, with this day and age that automation is such a common thing, you could even prepare like your dog training client and say, when you're closing them, like, you know what, you're going to be working with my staff. His name is Brett. You're going to love him even more than me, because you got to kind of warm him to,
Hmm.
you're not going to have me. But also, with all of us, including myself, after each lesson, you're going to receive an email and we're going to be asking how we did. This is just for us to do better, to learn from you, blah, blah, blah. But maybe preparing them so out of the blue, they're not like, ooh, is he like sketchy or something? Why am I suddenly getting these emails?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And again, automation is a huge part of that. For me to have to remember to do that every single time, it would never happen. Um, I would have too much going on day to day to remember to send that follow up email, which is why having these things be automated is just honestly, it improved our customer journey exponentially. We were able to be much
Amazing.
more involved with them.
Oh, I love that. Because, that's why we do this, and we get so separated from why we started becoming pet sitters or
Right.
dog trainers, and we're way over here. So what a great thing that is to get that connection with the client again. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, the scale itself, I think, is worth talking about. I use a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being totally satisfied. They're very happy. And the reason I use from 1 to 10 is because if I just give them from 1 to 5, they may say 5, but they didn't have enough wiggle room to give me all of the data I need. So that's why I'll say 10 and they may give me a 9. Well, where could we have done better?
Hmm.
What's your scale system look like? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh no, that's interesting. I mean, we've always used 1 through 5, but I like where you're coming from with that. When you're looking at a Google review,
Mm,
it's rude to say anything under a 5 if it was like anything above mediocre service, right? But if you were to go up to 10, maybe the restaurant's an 8. It was really good. He loved it, but maybe it took you 45 minutes to be seated, or I guess that would probably knock it down considerably. But, maybe it took a long time for somebody to come and fill your water, or
mhm.
maybe the table wasn't as clean as you think it should be, or something small where they could improve, but it's still a really good business that you would use, that you would go to again.
Yeah, you might say a
So yeah, I like
5.
that.
but if you had more wiggle room. And we started using that survey to prepare for asking for a review. And there's always those people that are like, they're never going to give anybody a 5-star review. So we found if we gave the scale of 1 to 10, we get the 9s there, and that we're not maybe going to ask you for a review.
Yeah.
But if we got a 1 or a 2 or 3, now we know we've got to try and fix something with the staff, with the client. And that leads me to my next question. If there is a problem, they're late, like, what do you do? Do you sit them down and talk to them right away? Do you wait till the review? What recommendations could you give business owners to get in there and fix that?
So I think it's important to look at the big picture, right? So if we have somebody who has been nothing but reliable
Hmm.
up until this point, it might just be a casual text message saying, "Hey, I noticed you're not here yet. Is everything okay?" Not jumping down their throat and acting like they're terrible people for being late, but trying to understand the situation. Um, if it's turning into something more chronic than that, again, I think it's really important to look at the entire picture. So there would be times when we were wildly understaffed and we were asking the people that worked for me to do too much. So we would be putting 5 or 6 visits into a time frame where you were lucky to fit in 5, right? So we would get these late notices, and if I had gone to that employee and said, "You're not doing your job. Why are you late?" They probably would have quit because I put them in that situation.
Right.
Um, we So I think also it's important to understand that everybody has their own life outside of work, right? Maybe, we had a woman that worked for me who, when she started, she was a stay-at-home mom, and her kids were in school, and one of them ended up she had to go to a daycare center that was a lot further away than that pushed her start times back. So she was consistently showing up late to her first visit. And when I asked her, what's going on? Do you need to start later? Do you need help with planning your day? How can I help you succeed here? She was very upfront. She was like, "I am now traveling an extra 30 minutes to drop my kid off at school. And I'm having a very hard time getting here on time." That's all I needed to know. So we started her a little bit later, and it worked out beautifully from there on. But certainly, if it's somebody is not showing up because they're lazy and they can't manage their time, that's an entirely different situation.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important to have a conversation and get the whole picture before you start reprimanding people, right? Try to fix the situation before you make it turn it into something ugly. But when you have a situation that is somebody is just not taking their job seriously, that's different. And I think that's something that most people have a hard time dealing with, including me. I don't want to say I'm a pushover, but I really don't like hurting people's feelings. Having those really tough conversations would keep me up at night. I hated it.
Yeah.
So, um, if I honestly probably let it go too long, too many times, certain things until it came to the point where it's like, there's obviously no fixing this. This person just can't work for me anymore. Um, so I would love your feedback. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have a hard time like me, dealing with the really unpleasant conversations, like once it really turns into something that, um, is more of a three strikes you're out kind of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Having those are tough conversations, but what I do now is different than what I used to do. Usually I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and something would go wrong and I'm unhappy and I'm like, oh, I hope I can talk to them later. And then, it kind of sucks to talk to them because it's a Debbie
Yeah.
Downer.
So you put it
And
on.
then the next day they do something so amazing and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
really awkward. Now it's
Right.
worse. So now I say, can we jump on a Zoom, or if they're there in person, can we talk? And I try to address it right away, because if not, you know, it'll just get swept under the rug and it's just going to keep building up. And it can help so much to just get on a Zoom or get in person or even get on a phone call and have a conversation with them. So deal with it right away. I think
Yes.
that is what I've learned to try and do. And even if you can't, do it, like, don't do it in, a text, or like a Vox or WhatsApp voice memo. Like, try and have a conversation so they can give their feedback too. That's kind of what I've learned to do today, but that's years of making that mistake, because yeah, it's tough to have those conversations. It sucks.
Yes. Yeah. Especially when you really like the person. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, that's what happens more often than not, right? Like you develop these really, great relationships with these people. And then
they're like
something negative
family.
happens and you're just like, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. But also you're here to run a business. And I think that's kind of what helped me push through the discomfort of it, was remembering that these people are responsible for lives, right? They're responsible for the health and safety of these pets in our care. And if I start letting things like that go, it could snowball. And then we could end up in some really bad situations where that dog could be in trouble or that cat could be in a really, in some deep trouble if that person is just like not even showing up, or not being careful coming in and out of the house, whatever it is. Um, so that's what pushed me through, is remembering that. But it is
Yeah.
very difficult.
And that was one, short topic, because I know we're getting over an hour. But we have to remember that we don't all share the same brain,
Sure.
and we are taking care of these animals. And some people, they don't know to shut doors. And I know it sounds funny. They don't know to secure and double check a kennel. They just do stuff wrong that we have been doing this for so long, we don't even think about it. And so for us to teach people, new staff members, these things, we really have to break it down about medications. Don't give too much, and definitely
Right.
give the right amount. And like, we aren't vets, but sometimes we have to administer medication. And doors, we have to, we don't think about even teaching that stuff. And I've heard horror stories of bad things happening because you take for granted, like, go just put this dog in the car. And they go put the dog in the car, but they don't close the door.
Right.
And, us as women, we would never do that because we're always like worrying about those things. But people don't know.
Yeah.
So you really have to teach sometimes that stuff. And
Yeah.
sometimes we have to learn the hard way.
Yeah. I think that was actually one of the hardest parts for me about creating the training program, was that I had been doing this for so long. I couldn't even think of all of the things that somebody might need to know but doesn't, right? Because all of it was second nature to me.
Yes.
So, I sat down with my sister and I was like, okay, if you were going to do this job, what kind of questions would you have? Right. And like, we really just kind of ping pong stuff back and forth for hours about how, not only what questions she knew she would have, but like, okay, so this situation comes up. Would you know what to do? And sometimes she was like, I would have no idea. Um, So we know to put that in the training. And I think it's really, really a good idea to have those conversations with somebody who isn't in the industry when you're putting together your training program, because I just assume people know all of these things, and realistically, they don't. Um,
Yeah.
so that's really important. Yeah.
Asking questions. Yeah, asking questions. We were doing a pet first aid and CPR for a doggy daycare, and they asked a question, what do we do when they drink the bleachy, dirty mop water out of the bucket? And I'm like, well, maybe don't leave the dirty, bleachy water bucket out. Like, I'm, how about we back up a little bit? But it's just like, how do we fix it? That no, don't leave the bucket with the bleachy water.
Right.
But we don't think we think differently, and sometimes we forget that dogs, if you leave something on their kennel, they're going to pull it into the kennel and eat it. Um, stuff like that, just that we might forget as well. Just making sure that doors are closed and things are put up. Cleaning is done properly. All of those things we take for granted because they're the basics, but having them in the manual, maybe having a Zoom where you just talk with your sister and record it so you can play it back for them. So you just saved yourself, making a video right there.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that really helped our new employees too was that um, after training, before they would start, um, going out on their own, we gave them this pretty detailed checklist of the most important things to do. And I said, I don't care how silly you feel, like you go through and you check those little boxes at every visit until you know this thing by heart. You're doing these things, um, just automatically without having to think about them, because there's a lot to think about when you're doing these visits or working with these animals, and like little things like, did you lock the door when you walked in the house? Some people might think that's stupid, but if you have a door that doesn't shut properly, it could blow open and now you could have cats and dogs down the street.
Yeah.
So little things like that. And honestly, Leanne, we throw so much at them so fast that it's really hard to remember it all. So
Yeah.
having those checklists for them really helps.
As different, but the same. A little story. We live in our RV and we move around sometimes. And, we'll move sometimes every 2 days, sometimes every 4 days, sometimes we'll stay somewhere for 3 months. And I have this checklist in my head. Okay, make sure I close and I lock the fridge and the freezer and I close the closet and I do this. And it's in our heads. And every day I'm like, I got to make a checklist. I know I started one, but and I definitely
Mhm.
forget stuff.
Yeah.
Out of 10 trips that we've done, I would forget one thing or Brett would forget one thing. And so having that checklist, even though it's stuff that we do, and it's like kind of like a big problem if we, leave the fridge so it can pop open while we're driving,
Yeah.
you still like you got so much and you're flying and maybe a phone
Yeah.
call comes in or something and you get
Exactly. One
distracted.
distraction can throw you off. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Hmm.
Definitely. So having that checklist, even if it's something you do all the time and you're an expert at it, it still can really help you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've talked for so long. I love it. This has just been amazing. I've learned so much. Maybe Corinne, you could share where people can find you, your website, any information.
Sure. Sure. So my website is petproinnovations.com. You can also visit petprotraining.thinkific, which is where our online dog walker training is. We do offer customizable dog walker training so that they can reflect each business's systems and policies. It's not just blanket for everyone because every business is unique and has their own challenges. So we do that for them too.
So that was Pet Pro Think,
Innovations dot
and then
thinkific. It's THINKIFIC.com.
so a dog walking business could technically send their staff through that course.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. So we'll create
Awesome.
an online course for them, customized for their business, and
Oh,
their staff can take that. So we have
perfect.
monthly plans where they can send as many people as they want through the training, or you can order it piece by piece. So
Awesome. 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 You'll have to start doing that for dog trainers and groomers too.
I would love to.
'Cause a lot of it is just like, trying not to get bit and
Oh yeah,
making sure everybody's
absolutely.
alive.
Definitely. Definitely. That'd be a fun collaboration.
Yes. Awesome. Was there anything else that you could think of that you wanted to share today?
I think so. This has been really fun. I'm glad you had me on.
Thank you for joining me. And again, I'm Leanne Shinton, Pet Biz Experts, petbizexperts.com. And we are starting with automation dogs, automationdogs.com. And we're launching that pretty much like today. And Karen from SoFetch Consulting, who I think you know as well, she created that website for me. And I'm excited for people to see our new brand.
I'm excited for
Awesome.
you.
Thanks. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.